So I have a sister. Her name is Heather. And I have a picture of her hiking in the Grand Teton Mountains that's in like Wyoming. It's like 3 years ago or so she did this. She lives in Colorado and she like loves hiking. She does that all the time. But this was during a 3-day backpacking trip. And if you don't know what backpacking is, it's pretty self-explanatory. It means everything that you have, like your food, your tent, your clothing, all that stuff, is all carried in your backpack the entire time. So that during this whole 3-day trip, everything you need is in that backpack. Well, for this trip, she went with one of her good friends, Megan. I have a picture of them two together. They're just chilling. I think that's towards the end because they're looking a little rough. Her and Megan left around the same time as a good chunk of other people. So there was like a lot of people going on this hike. And the thing is, nearly all of those people ended up going like the opposite direction as Heather and Megan. They went counterclockwise, and Heather and Megan went clockwise because of like permits and like where they could camp and stuff like that. So for the majority of the hike, Heather and Megan would like occasionally see other people, but they were by themselves like the majority of the time. And my sister, Megan's a little bit taller than her, but my sister is like not as tall as I am. She's about 5'2", so she's kind of little. And this is where it's important to mention that before she left, I have an aunt and uncle that live in Colorado, and like some other people that have like gone backpacking and stuff, gave her some tips and advice and like some stuff that she just like needs to be prepared for. One of those things was bears. Two things you got to bring when you're backpacking and like especially expecting bears. One, bear spray. It's like pepper spray, but for bears. I don't know why it's specifically for bears. And the second thing is a bear canister. I have a picture of that too. That little 22 thing on the bottom left. That is her bear canister. And it's basically like you're hiking all day and you get sweaty and gross and all that stuff. And bears have a really good sense of smell, better than humans. And they can smell basically anything that smells like human. And I don't know about you guys, but like if I'm wearing this shirt all day, it's going to smell really gross like Shane by the end of the day. And the bear canister is basically like you take anything that smells like human at the end of the day, you put it in the bear canister, you seal it, and basically so the bear can't like smell you during the night and like come and do bear stuff and all that good stuff. But of course, Heather took this advice seriously and took all the stuff that she needed. Obviously, she had that bear canister. Well, of course, on their second day, it was a 3-day trip. On their second day, they actually saw a bear. It was pretty cool. Other people were around. It was a bit off in the distance, so it was like not a huge deal. That was on day number 2. But on day number 3, was a little bit different. They had been hiking all day until they like reached a river, and it like got to nighttime, and they got to this river, and there was like a bridge across it. And having seen the bear the day before, they kind of thought like we should be a little bit extra cautious and put the bear canister with all of our food and toiletries and all that stuff across the river. So they did that as soon as they got to the campsite. They did that. They put it across the river just to basically say, hey, I want to not really deal with the bear tonight. But they got in their tent and were kind of like chilling and stuff. And then it started raining. And they were like, my bear canister is all the way across. I have my backpack with me. And like, I think they were like reading and stuff. So they're like, I'm just going to like keep my backpack with me. It'll be fine. Because they didn't want to trek across in the rain. And the thing is, the backpack still smelled very much like human. And this is where I asked my sister about this story the other day. She mentioned my brother and sister are very different. My brother had just gone to the Grand Tetons like a couple of years or the year before, and he didn't bring bear spray or bear canister or anything like that. He said he woke up one morning and walked out of his tent, and like one of his flip-flops were on the other side of the campground. Didn't really think anything of it. It was probably a bear, but he just was like, it's no big deal, moved on. But Heather did all of this still, but had her backpack with her in the tent, and that night, Heather and Megan were in their tent, like winding down and like reading, when they heard a noise, and it was a bear. And it may go without saying, but she said that they were, in fact, terrified for their lives. She told me the detail that like they're obviously like you're freaking out, you don't want to move, you don't want to like cause a noise or anything, and she could actually see the imprint of the bear's nose like on her tent. So like it was like right there. And I said everything they were carrying was in their backpack, so their tent was like 6 pounds. So like if the bear like wanted to just scratch, like he could rip that tent open in no time. And the bear ended up wandering around their campsite for at least 6 hours. It was nighttime and like they couldn't sleep and stuff. I say at least because eventually it got so late they were like exhausted obviously from hiking all day. And Heather told me, she said to Megan, if this bear was going to eat us, it would have already, so let's just try to sleep. So they did, but only for like 2 hours because I wouldn't sleep super great either. And when they woke up, the bear was gone, or like at least they thought the bear was gone. So they made a plan, and the plan is basically what they ended up doing. They gathered everything up into their backpacks the best that they could, like lopsided. They rushed it. It was poorly packed because it was like huge. And then they unzipped the tent and took up the stakes like as fast as possible. And no pun intended, Heather then like bear hugged their tent and like took it up with her and just like sprinted off with it and just like took off just running like that with her tent. And I think Megan, she said also Megan like grabbed the bear canister on the way because it was like super expensive. It had like their phones and stuff in there. And Heather said, like this, running with the tent, that she ran at least an hour just like running as fast as she could, just carrying a tent like that. Because she didn't know, like you didn't know how close that bear was. Like they only slept a couple hours. It could have still been right there. So then they ran for like an hour, and then they packed up the tent and made it easier and stuff. And luckily that was their last day of the trip. It was super exhausting. And she said like she got to her car at the end of the camp, or at the end of like where they started, because it was like a circle. And she like physically hugged her car and was like, oh, I'm so glad to be back in, not eaten by a bear. But very fortunate for her because I don't know if you guys have seen The Revenant. I'm not recommending it, but has Leonardo DiCaprio, and his bear encounter doesn't go super well in that movie, and most bear encounters don't go super well. But I'm sharing this story tonight because we're looking at a bear story of our own in the Bible. And we're going through this series kind of just of crazy stories of stuff that happens in the Bible called Wow. Can you guys say that with me? I like it when you guys say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Wow, yeah, wow. I'm calling it this just because, like, when I read this, like, just our tagline, like, when I read this story, I'm just like, I can't help but say, wow, like, that's there. And this story may be the craziest, most unexpected, and hard to understand yet. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn to 2 Kings, 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25. And if you don't have one, there's extra Bibles over there. You can keep it if you would like to, but we'll also have it on the screen. The books of 1st and 2nd Kings are in the Bible. They were originally actually written as one book, just the book of Kings, but scrolls weren't super long back then, and they couldn't fit all of it just on one scroll, so they broke it into 2 parts. And this book is basically... we have 2 main characters in it, not 2 main characters, but 2 people who we see a lot in it are Elijah and Elisha. You have one with a J and then one with a sh, like my name, like Shane. Elijah and Elisha, and they were prophets. They have like this mentor and protege like relationship. Elijah was the mentor, and then Elisha was the protege. This is who we're talking about tonight. We're talking about the protege, the guy basically like the grasshopper to his sensei, the Padawan to his like he's basically like a mentor type relationship. And the goal of any good teacher is to make their protege greater than themselves. Like you don't want to get done with your teaching and your time spent pouring into somebody and for them to be like worse at that thing than you, because then you probably weren't a very good teacher. And in a crazy story that honestly probably could have been a part of this series that happened right before what we're about to talk about, we see sort of a passing of the baton of Elijah being like the head honcho prophet that God uses for absolutely everything. And the baton is passed from Elijah to Elisha. And we get to this point, and basically Elijah just casually parts a body of water. They walk across it, and then it says a fiery chariot, so either a chariot made of fire or a chariot on fire. I don't really know which one. He got in that, and then it took him up in a whirlwind into the clouds, and God took him to heaven just like that. And then Elisha was just like, all right, guess it's just me now. So that happened, and then after that, we see that God had just taken Elijah to heaven. But before this, we clearly see that God is giving Elisha the full authority and power that his predecessor had, that Elijah had. And that's a very big deal. He's basically saying, you're picking up where Elijah left off as my head honcho big prophet. And I point this out because what we read tonight won't make any sense at all if we don't all understand what prophets were at this time and why God sent them. What they were was basically a prophet in the book of Kings was God using a person to speak on his behalf, to speak to humans as a human in ways basically that they could understand coming from God. This is basically God just utilizing a person to help other of his people basically understand what he was trying to let them see. And God sent prophets. The why behind it is to steer them away from idol worship. And we always just think like they're worshiping like a statue, and a lot of times that was in the Old Testament. But that's basically just anything we put before God. And Elisha and Elijah were like, hey, putting anything before God, that's not great. I'm here to show you otherwise and to deliver them from a much greater punishment. And you have to keep that in mind, that that's why God sent prophets the entire time, because that's so important to keep in mind, especially when we read this crazy thing that we're about to read in 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25 says, Elisha had just like done a couple miracles. It was pretty cool. And then we pick up here at the end of this chapter, and it says, from there, Elisha went up to Bethel. And as he was walking up the path, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, chanting, "Go up, Baldy! Go up, Baldy!" And that's why I say, like, wow, to follow the story. Like, that's in the Bible. Verse 24, he turned around, Elisha turned around, looked at them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the children. Yeah, and then verse 25, from there, Elisha went to Mount Carmel, and then he returned to Samaria, just casually went on his way after that. So what this teaches us is very simple. Don't make fun of bald people or you'll be mauled by bears. I'm kidding, but like, kind of not. Many questions like kind of rush to mind just off the top of my head when I read this. Like, were these actually children? Were these kids that this happened to? There is a chance, and I won't say that that's not possible, but probably not. The rough translation of the word used for the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, and roughly translating that word, it was used to describe any person between the ages of 12 and 30. So like, yeah, they could have been 12. But also they could have been 30. And it even describes the King David in the Bible as this same word as the little child word. And it also describes him as a mighty, valiant man and a man of war. So if you're both of those things, you're probably not 12. So probably not children. I can't say that it definitely wasn't. Also, why did they say go up, Baldy? Kind of weird. 2 parts. Yeah, I think he was bald. That's probably the obvious part of it. 2 parts. The go up part, it was honestly probably a common knowledge that there was kind of like a prophecy that Elijah was going to be taken up in the clouds because like he knew it was coming. Elisha knew it was coming. Like if you read the chapter leading up to that, like they were anticipating that happening. Like it wasn't a surprise. So there was a good chance a lot of people knew about that. And they were basically looking at Elisha and they were like, we're so glad that he's gone because he's like, we don't like him. He's telling us that what we're doing is wrong. So we want you to be gone too. So they're saying, go up, just like he did. Go up in that fiery chariot. We don't want you here either. And then, just like she pointed out, the second part, Baldy, it's pretty straightforward. The thing is, Elisha, from what we can understand as like being the protege here, he was probably like my age, like mid-20s. So like he was completely bald at this time, and he was probably pretty self-conscious of this. So like, because that's an early age to be balding. So they were kind of getting to where like they knew it would bother him. But Also, another question that comes to mind is why bears? Why specifically female bears were sent? I don't know. You got me there. I have no idea. But the biggest question that I want us to be able to answer is the simplest one. What can we learn from this? And the short answer is resisting God-given correction is not good. It's a really, really easy idea. Resisting God-given correction is not good. This is our big idea, our one big takeaway I want everybody to see tonight. This is what I want us to get. To oppose, to protest against, to even ignore God-given correction is a bad place to be. That said, we've got like 3 quick things to help us understand kind of what that means. First thing, God-given correction is a gift. I said that God sent Elisha as a prophet. Number 1, a prophet at this time was basically, like I said earlier, sent as God speaking through a human to his people so that they could understand him. And the why behind why God sent prophets is to help guide them away from idolatry. Basically to say, hey, stop wasting your life being engrossed with and obsessing over something other than God. I want to help you see this. God didn't send prophets as like a plea, begging people to say, man, I need you to come back to me. Like, that doesn't make sense. He's God. He does not need us. That wouldn't make sense at all. He loved them so much, though, that he cared enough to go through all of this nonsense, to put up with their idol worship, and offered the prophets as guidance and their words as a tangible method to return back to him. Like, God didn't have to send prophets to say, hey, idol worship is bad, you need to turn back to me. He could have just let them be. But God knew that following him was better, so that's why he sent prophets for them. That's exactly why he sent Elisha. Not as some old crotchety man with like no sense of humor sitting on his porch, like waving his cane, yelling, get off my lawn. Like, that's kind of the picture that we get of Elisha here if we don't understand why God sent prophets. If you read this story, verses 23 and 24, without understanding why God did that, then that's how he comes across, but that's not what happened here. Verse 24 tells us that Elisha literally did exactly what he was sent to do. He's just said, God, I'm going to let you do your work here. I mean, if you read this in verse 25 or verse 24, it says, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. He said, hey, I'm basically putting this in God's hands. Elisha did his job. He might have felt threatened, insulted, discouraged. I mean, there was at least 42 of them, and they were probably all young men, and they were probably crowding him and saying like, hey, we want nothing to do with you. They might have been like threatening him violence and stuff like that. But Elisha didn't let his emotions get the best of him. He didn't call on the bears himself or even cause them to come. God did that, which is kind of crazy. God did that. Elisha wiped his hands of the situation and said, it's between you and God now. And a lot of times, like, we can see that and we'll be like, oh, sweet, God always forgives. He'll go easy on me. All I have to do is say I'm sorry and I can just go ahead and do it again. That's not how it works. We see that here. I'm reminded, I had a friend when I was like in middle school, maybe like early high school. His name was Riley. And he went to this auction like in the middle of like nowhere, Missouri. He didn't have cell reception. I think he was playing like Angry Birds the entire time. And it was in a barn. And it was just this auction of like farm stuff and like tractor pieces and stuff like that. And then out of nowhere, I don't know if you're familiar with who this is, but somebody comes up with a gold picture frame, probably about this big, of a former rapper named Tupac. And they were holding it up there. And Riley kind of heard what was going on and looked up, and it was a picture of Tupac, and it said, "Only God can judge me." And so random in the middle of they're just selling pitchforks and tractor pieces, and then a picture of Tupac. And then this comes up, and Riley's like, $5. And he offers $5, and everybody just looks at him, and nobody else bid on it. So he got it for $5, and he gave it to me kind of as a joke, and I still have it. And I think it's hilarious. It's like a gold picture frame. It's huge. But he got that for me as a joke, but the phrase on there, "Only God can judge me," is used for people to say you got nothing on me, you can't say anything to me. But that phrase, that should scare us, just like it is Kaylee right now. We'll say with a puffed out chest, man, you're not God. You can't tell me anything. Who are you to me? We'll look at people who love us, looking out for us dead in the face and say, you're not God, I don't have to listen to you. But I'm sorry, like, I would rather my friend call me out on something than be mauled by bears. Like, it's pretty straightforward here. Seriously, I'd much rather a godly, loving friend like Cody or McLean or like any of my friends, or like a mentor like Ben or Jason or Tom drop the hammer on me and tell me when I'm putting something before God. I'd rather them do that and say, hey, you're really messing up right now. Like, hey, you really need help in this area right now. I'd rather somebody who loves me and my friend do that, because any hammer that they drop on me won't be as heavy as the one God will. Like, they can't call on bears. God can. This is why you being plugged in and engaged in your small group, it really does matter so much. Each of us here, myself included, need people in our lives like Elisha. People who love and care about us enough to point us to God no matter what. People who are our peers, our friends, who put God's will before our comfort. People who are like, if they don't see you on a Sunday morning in small groups, are like texting you and you're like, hey, I missed you, like, where were you? Not like to say, hey, I'm better than you, I was here, but to be like, hey, I care about you, I know this is good to be here, where were you? Or to be like, holding you accountable, like if you're saying, I'm reading through my Bible this week, like to ask you at the end of the week, hey, how'd that go? Were you able to do it? I wasn't able to do it. I did 6 out of 7. 7th day was hard. Have you been praying? Like friends who ask you, have you been praying? This is what I've been praying about. People that share that stuff with you, or like, I love it. One of my friends asked me recently, and like it kind of is an uncomfortable feeling, but what has God been teaching you lately? And if I don't have an answer to that, like, I want to be accountable to that. I want God to be teaching me something. And if my friend loves me, they're going to be asking me that. Do we have friends like this? Are we friends like this? Like, we can shake our heads and say, my friends aren't like this. But are we friends like that to other people? Elisha was sent to them as a gift from God. They didn't really like what they were hearing, but he was saying things that they didn't like and made them uncomfortable. But in their own pride, they resisted someone telling them like it is. And why? Because they said, I don't like that. I don't want to hear that, which leads to our second thing. We need God's correction and direction. Like, you hear about like discipline, the idea of discipline like being a good thing, and we never like to experience it. And that's kind of what we're getting at here. Why? It's a rhetorical question, but like, why do we get discipline? Think about that. When good discipline happens how it's supposed to, why does it happen? To teach us, like, what does it teach us? To not do that thing anymore, right? Like, whether it's for our own benefit, whether it's for the benefit of those around us, it teaches us something good. That's its proper place. I'm not saying that's always how it happens, but like, that's its proper place. Like, parents do their children a huge favor by properly disciplining them. Like, I'd be a pretty bad adult, and I'm not saying I'm a great adult, but if my parents never told me I was doing anything wrong, because I did a lot of really wrong things, and if they never told me that's wrong, you need to be disciplined for that, I wouldn't have learned anything from it. And because of that, I'm grateful to them for punishing me and disciplining me growing up. Did I always understand why? Maybe not. Did I always like it? No, probably actually never liked it, because that's how discipline works. But if I liked punishment or discipline, it wouldn't really be punishment or discipline. I've been told that we learn more from like negative experiences in life than in positive ones. I'm sure you all have like some kind of idea of what I mean by that. Something I learned was I went on a senior trip with one of my friends named Jake. My senior year to Colorado. We were going to ski there. It was super fun. It was just us two going. And on the way there, Jake was driving, and we stop off at one of those like rest stops that basically is just like, has like bathrooms, it has like vending machines, has like a big field and stuff. And we had been in the car. We're in the middle of Kansas, so like it's like nothing. It's just fields everywhere, and it's really boring. And we had been in the car all day, and we just decided to like play catch with a football for a while, because we were like just sitting on our butts all day. And Jake, being super smart, decided to set the keys down in this huge field. And we were playing catch for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, all right, you ready to go? And he's like, yeah, you have the keys? And I was like, no, you were driving. And he was like, you're right, don't know where the keys are. So we looked for the keys for about like an hour. And in the middle of Kansas, and to mention we didn't have cell service. So we eventually found it. I found it. He'll tell you that he found it, but he didn't. I found them, even though he was driving. But all that to say, this taught me I should probably always know where my keys are. I didn't want to have to go through that. I didn't want to have to experience not having cell service in the middle of the ugliest state in the entire world to say, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it taught me something. And God knows that our best lives are only lived through him, and sometimes it takes hard things to learn that. Isaiah 55 tells us that God says, anytime you stop seeking your own gain and instead favor mine, I will help you find that in no time. That's what he's saying right here. Like, if you seek the Lord, you're going to find him. And let any person who's seeking the Lord return to him. God's not going to make that difficult. And then verses 8 and 9, why? Your thoughts are not capable, not even meant to be as great as mine. You need me, is what God's saying. Translation, you can't get on my level. And this is why him showing us that we need him is so needed. The most hateful thing that God could ever do would be to willingly watch all of humanity forget about him without intervening. Enter Jesus Christ. That's where we get Jesus in the Bible. Jesus came to say, A, let me show you how much you need God, and B, let me provide a way for you to permanently have access to him for the rest of eternity. God even goes so far to say that he will forgive everything wrong we've ever done and heal us if we humble ourselves and say, God, I need you. This is what 2 Chronicles chapter 7 says. God says, if my people, and right now, that's anybody who cries out to Jesus, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn away, then I will hear from them, from heaven, and I'm going to forgive them and I'm going to heal them. And this is why God-given conviction is like so good, because it gets us to a point where we are forgiven and we are healed. Because whether we like it or not, this conviction points us back to who we need, and God is gracious enough to show us that. That's why I love 2 Corinthians 7. This is Paul writing to a group of potential maybe believers. He's not sure who all he's addressing. And he says, as it is, I rejoice, not that you're going through hard stuff, not that you're grieved, but because your grieving turns you to repentance. Because your grieving turns something good. For you felt a godly grief, a conviction that God gave you. And so you suffered really nothing through it because you saw the goodness of God and how much you needed him through going through that. God is not happy when we're grieved or confused or convicted or frustrated or lost. But sometimes that's the best way for us to see how badly we need him. And let's wrap up with our last thing. Number 3, resisting God's gift has consequences. I mean, this is pretty obvious. God sent Elisha as a gift. Then these 42 young men who stuck out their tongues at God and said, thanks, but no thanks, they were mauled by 2 female bears. Like, this happens in the Bible. The Hebrew word here for maul, or sometimes in some translations it says tears, tore the 42 men, is also used to refer to breaking open of a mountain or city walls, or it was used to describe the dividing of the Red Sea, or splitting wood, or breaking bottles, or making a way through a line of soldiers. So yeah, the 42 young men probably didn't make it, like if that's how it's describing what happened. It's a tough pill to swallow, but God didn't do anything wrong here. When he saw their idol worship, if you read the Old Testament at all, that's constantly what God's people are doing. They're like, oh, God's good, but this is better. And that they constantly keep doing that. And we can look at them and be like, oh, why are they doing that? I would never do that. Idol, that's dumb. But we do that. We do that with our phones, with social media, with other people's approval, with popularity. And God looked at this, and he's like, I'm sure his reaction was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the same exact thing that you keep struggling with. I keep forgiving you, but this is like the 12th time this week. And we look at this, and God's like, That's literally just a statue. And most of the time it was a statue that they had a hand in making themselves that they were worshiping, which sounds crazy to us. God's like, you don't need that. Stop pouring everything you have into that. And I say, we'll look at them like, that's really dumb. But God is saying the same thing to us. That's literally just a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Man, that's literally just a like on a picture. That's literally just popularity. That's literally just a team that you did or didn't make. Why are you putting it above me? You don't need that. Stop pouring everything you have, your efforts, your thoughts, your energy into that. Man, thank goodness God is much more patient and merciful than me, because there would have been nothing wrong with God being like, zap. Like before they even started like mocking Elisha or anything like that. But he didn't. Because he's so good and treats us so much better than we deserve. God sees his people being rotten, like terrible, cussing him out, saying, man, I want nothing to do with you. I'm so glad Elijah is out of here. I want nothing to do with Elisha. And God's response to them acting that way to him was to send a gift. God was like, yo, I'm going to make the perfect gift for them. I'm going to make a great communicator, one that knows me very well. I'm going to shine his head real good. It'll look really good. I'm going to make him understand me well. I'm going to make him have a mentor. It's going to be great. They're going to benefit so great from that. They're going to turn away from idolatry. And they tore that gift apart before God's eyes. They were like, yo, go up, Baldy. We want nothing to do with you. The one question that we'll never really be able to answer is about God's timing. Like, why was this the point where those 42 young men like crossed the line? And I'll be honest, I don't know. Like, we can't answer stuff like, why did God do that? He's God. Like, we read it earlier in Isaiah 55. His thoughts are greater than my thoughts, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. I know God's timing and will is best. God delivered a gift to them they didn't deserve. Follow along with me, I know. God delivered a gift to them they didn't deserve, as a means for them to be delivered from a much greater punishment that they all very well deserved before they ever opened their mouths to mock Elisha. And if what I just, like, maybe you see a parallel to Jesus there, maybe you don't. We all deserve eternal separation from God, like, for forever. But God. Like, those are probably the two greatest words that we can ever hear. God chose to make a way back to him. Like, he didn't have to do that. Before Jesus was sent to seek and save the lost, before he was spit on, before he was beaten, before he was mocked, whipped, cussed out, stabbed, publicly humiliated, all that, before any of that, we deserve to be apart from God forever. But God, I love Ephesians 2. I don't think I have it on here. But Ephesians 2 tells us, but God, he saw all this, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, when we were spitting on him, made us alive together with Christ. He made a way for the people in this story to be delivered from the bears, but they said, get out of here, you suck, you're lame, I don't like a bald head. Like that's how they responded. In the same way, he makes a way out of eternal suffering through Jesus. And he makes this very readily accessible to anybody who sees who Jesus was. And to turn down the gift of Jesus will bring something much worse than a couple of female bears. So what do we do with this? Reading about people rejecting God and facing consequences like isn't super fun. It's kind of scary, but it paints a real picture that God is making very clear to us. We can ask all the live long day, like I said earlier, why did God do this? Why does God allow good things to happen to bad people and bad things to happen to good people? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why God ... The only real question, though, worth asking here is, why did this happen? Because we see that this happened. This isn't a hypothetical. And this happened simply, they rejected God's gift. What we can learn is very simple. What should we do? I really don't want to make it more complex than it is. Take the gift. Like, I'm not saying from me, from anybody. Like, if God is offering a gift, we need to take it. Like, Have you guys, I don't know if you guys like ever take like medicine, or especially like liquid medicine for like coughs, like gross. Michaela won't even take liquid medicine. Like she'll have the worst cough in the world, and like I'll have to drive to Walgreens and get like some like other medicine. Or like a really big pill that kind of tastes like chalk. Like I don't want anything to do with that. Or if you've ever had to do like physical therapy after like breaking something to like make it healthy again, or like make a muscle healthy again, like that's the worst. Or even like eating healthy, that's the worst. Like, why doesn't kale taste good? I think before Adam and Eve like sinned, kale probably tasted a lot better. And like, it's literally tough to swallow, but it is good. But guess what? Like when it comes to medicine, when it comes for hard stuff that's good for us, that doesn't mean you need it any less. That doesn't also mean that you need to take it any less. Let me challenge you on something. If you read something in the Bible and your first inclination is to say, I don't like that, or I think God should have done that. I mean, that's natural, but maybe, just maybe, that's on you and not the all-knowing God of the universe who has existed forever and knows everything. Maybe. I say that because I had to come to that same place of humility. Like, I don't understand why God did this. Well, maybe that's because God's a lot smarter than I am. Maybe that's because God's a lot better than I am. Maybe when we read or hear about God telling us something that we don't like or don't understand, that's because we can't wrap our minds around how good his plan is with our smaller brains, and that's okay. Sometimes we don't like the people that God has placed or ordained to be godly leaders in our lives. Like Pastor Kenny is a fantastic leader, but like if he were to like make a decision that like I wouldn't make that decision, God still placed him in charge. God still gave me the gift of making him the leader of this church. And I still get the opportunity to say, hey, he's doing something different from me and he is submitting to God. I still get to follow him in that. And that's the same way with like our small group leaders. Like they may like challenge you to do stuff that like you may not like or may not have done otherwise. And that's good. Like they're fulfilling Elisha's role here. And I want us to do the same thing. God will still teach you something from them if you humbly submit to him. Sometimes we don't like things that God tells us to do. And that's also okay. Being obedient to God in something that you're like, I don't know, I don't really want to do that. Being obedient in that area, saying, whatever, God told me to do it, I'm going to do it anyway, will probably teach you more than something you like doing anyway. God-given uncomfortableness, lumps in throats, conviction, if you're me, back sweats, are really good. Because God's like, hey, I'm getting your attention. It may make you uncomfortable. You may not really like it. I'm getting your attention for a reason. That pill that's tough to swallow may end up being better for you than the best tasting medicine in the entire world. And that's why I say resisting God-given correction, though natural, it's not good. Take the gift. Let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for challenging us with crazy stories about specifically 2 female bears and a bald guy. God, thank you so much for being generous to us and making your word interesting. God, you didn't have to do that. It could have just been a boring list of rules, but you didn't make it that way. You made it a story, one that we can learn from, one that we can read, and one that we can adapt to our own lives. God, that's so awesome. God, thank you so much for each student that's here. God, thank you that we can be confident that nobody in this room is here by mistake, but you are teaching us something from your word here tonight on purpose, on this day on purpose. God, help us to take what you've told us seriously and take the gifts that you're offering us. God, thank you so much for every student that's already following you. Help them to continue to grow. God, I challenge every student that may not know where they're at regarding a relationship with you, to not reject that gift, to not ignore that gift, but to say, I don't know what to do with this. I want to start following God. How do I do that? God, thank you so much for your word. Help us to utilize it. In your son's name, amen.